talk about building. We know that fat gain is necessary. Now, talk about your approach real quick about how you approach a deficit and what does that duration usually look like? I know it's different from client to client, but what is like your rate of the deficit? How do you approach that?
Yeah, so it depends a little bit again on what sort of person I'm working with. I will give hard answers because I hate people on podcasts that give these like, it depends, and that's all they say. So if I'm working with someone
That's what I was kind of
in
encourage you not to say, so we can get some sort of guidance.
I get so frustrated with those people. It just makes me think that maybe they don't actually know what they're talking about because like the it depends means like the get out of jail free card, don't have to answer anything. But
Secret.
when I'm working with someone in the higher body fat ranges, and by higher body fat ranges, I'm talking sort of 20% plus for a male and 30% plus for a female, then I like to adopt a more aggressive rate of weight loss on a per week basis. And that'll look something like 1 to 2% body weight drops per week. Now, that sounds like a lot, but when you are carrying extra amount of body fat, that body fat has a pronounced protective effect over your lean mass. If we look at some of the research from obese weight loss studies, they can lose 20 to 35 kilos of complete fat tissue with no change in their lean mass. Now, if you took that same approach with like an athlete who is relatively lean, that if you had the same amount of weight loss, we're talking roughly 50% fat, 50% lean mass loss in someone who's already relatively lean to begin with. So, what I'm trying to say there is if you are working with someone who's carrying a little bit more, you can push them a little bit faster and you're not going to have to worry about lean mass deterioration or strength and performance decline in the gym. Now, the other benefit that has is when you are having someone who's above 20 or 30% body fat, that is enough fat to be covering all definition whatsoever.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to lose like a solid 5 to 10 kilos of fat tissue before you're
Yeah.
probably going to notice much visual change in your photos. So if you just adopt a really slow rate of weight gain with these people, often you get a lot of buyout because they've dieted for 6 weeks and they've
Yeah.
dropped 3 kilos and they look exactly the fucking same as when they started. And they're
Yeah.
like, geez, screw this. Like, what's the point of this dieting crap? Like, I look the same.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go fast, they start seeing the scale dropping really rapidly, and then that encourages their motivation and it helps their buy-in. And they're like, okay, and then they start seeing some improvements happen relatively quickly. You know, it's like, okay, this guy is not an idiot. He actually knows what he's doing here. So, like to take a bit more of an aggressive approach with people who have a bit more fat to lose. Now, when we're working on the other side of the spectrum, athletes, people who are already relatively lean to begin with, we want to adopt a slightly slower rate of weight loss because, as I touched on, the leaner you are, the more susceptible you are to losing a proportion of lean mass in your weekly weight losses. So, somewhere between 0.5 to 1% body weight losses per week is a pretty safe range for a male person who's sitting in like the 15 to 10% body fat range, or like a 25 to 20 for like a female. Now, if you're going even below that, that's when we start approaching sort of like contest figures,
Yeah.
you know, below 10, below 20, and getting down into those like single digits. That's when you want to go even slower. And there's been research to show that in males below 10% body fat, um, for a kilo of weight loss, up to 65% or 70% of that can be lean mass. So you go too fast, you are just going to be
Yeah.
sacrificing lean tissue at that point because you don't have a whole lot of body fat left to lose. So um, basically, the fatter you are, the faster I go. The leaner you are, the slower I go is
Yeah,
probably
and that kind
the
of even goes into like building muscle too. Like as a trained athlete, so whether it's a client that's a competitor or just an athlete that's been training for has years of training under their belt, they're probably not going to see drastic changes with their approaches, right? Unless they're going full on, but it takes time. That at the end of the day, it takes time, and that's why with like before and after photos, sure, you can create really drastic change in a short amount of time, but that's not ideal for everybody. And unfortunately, if your goal is to, build lean mass and then maintain lean mass, you have to be conscious of your approach, right? You don't want to, like you said earlier, shoot yourself in the foot. You put so much work, push through the, discomfort to build muscle, and then you go super drastic with your approach with weight loss or fat loss, and then you start losing weight that's also lean body mass, and you're like, well, what the heck was that all about, right? So that's why it's important
Mhm,
as a coach to, when clients are hesitant, I think the best thing that works for me is to explain why we're doing things, right? Give them the both of the options, right? What they want and what, my recommendation is, and talk about what gets you where, right? What is your goal, right? This is my recommended approach. You want this approach. Let's talk about what will happen with both. So then they're aware of why you're just going slow, or why they're not seeing drastic change, or why they are seeing drastic change. Oftentimes we can't, don't get into that mindset of just prescribing. Let's educate. Educating empowers your clients. And
mhm,
your goal is not to have your clients for the rest of your life, right? They should be able to take on the
exactly.
knowledge. Like, I learned this. That's how you know you're a good coach. When your client can go teach someone else what you